He shouldn't be able to do anything. It's getting worse and worse about him.
Within the solemn setting of Westminster Abbey, where the British royal family gathers to honor the most revered chapters of its history, Queen Consort Camilla appeared wearing a flawless smile, carefully concealing an ambition as sharp and dangerous as a blade. Through what seemed like a small and insignificant action, she positioned Tom Parker Bowles, her son who holds no royal blood, into a role long considered the untouchable symbol of Princess Anne. It was a quiet yet deliberate declaration of war, marking the first move in a bold and calculated conspiracy. Princess Anne remained seated in silence, her expression composed and authoritative, betraying nothing on the surface. Yet beneath that calm exterior, a slow-burning fury smoldered. In that very moment, Anne had already arranged her own chessboard, patiently waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike a decisive checkmate. When two formidable women meet on the razor-thin line between honor and intrigue, what hidden truths are poised to erupt? Who will ultimately claim the throne, and who will be swept aside by the approaching storm of power? Soft, autumn light streamed through the stained glass windows of Westminster Abbey as a solemn memorial service for royal veterans unfolded. Reverence filled every corner of the ancient space, from the gleaming wooden pews to the silent stone figures lining the corridors. The organ's low, resonant tones rolled down from the choir loft, intertwining with prayers and blending into the restrained murmurs of invited guests. The British royal family, long regarded as a symbol of loyalty and respect, was present in full, gathered to honor sacrifices that history would never forget. Princess Anne entered the Grand Hall with her familiar bearing. Tall and straight-backed, her silver hair was neatly secured at the nape of her neck, framing an angular face etched with lines that testified to decades of endurance and duty. She wore dark clothing, a modest wool coat and a long skirt, simple yet dignified, projecting quiet authority. Over the course of her life, from youth to advancing age, she had attended countless ceremonies like this. Her place was always the same, a seat of honor beside senior royals, a position that represented far more than comfort. It embodied a lifetime of unwavering service. But as Anne neared the front row, her pace slowed. An uneasy sensation swept over her, like an unexpected chill in the air. The familiar seat, marked by a finely crafted royal insignia, a silver shield emblazoned with a lion and crown, was no longer empty. Tom Parker Bowles was sitting there. He was the son of Queen Consort Camilla from a previous marriage. Seated with a courteous smile, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit, he appeared to blend seamlessly into the royal setting. Yet the reality was unmistakable. He carried no royal blood. He was a man with an established career in food writing and media, suddenly placed at the very center of a ceremony steeped in royal tradition. Anne paused, her gaze moving slowly across the rows. Her assigned place was now a secondary pew just behind the front, typically reserved for lesser figures such as local officials or peripheral guests. For the first time, she felt herself deliberately displaced. This was no oversight. It was intentional. Her pulse quickened as the message became clear. This was strategy. Camilla was testing boundaries, positioning Tom in a seat of prominence so the public would grow accustomed to seeing him as part of the royal inner circle. And perhaps, in time, this would open the door to something more, a formal title, even without royal lineage. A surge of indignation rose within Anne. This was not merely a personal slight. It was an affront to the dignity of the monarchy she had spent her entire life defending. She took her place in the secondary pew, her expression composed, her movements restrained and proper, as though nothing were amiss. Inside, however, anger burned steadily. Years of discipline allowed her to suppress every outward sign of turmoil. Her thoughts sharpened instead. Was King Charles aware of this arrangement, she wondered, or was this yet another maneuver orchestrated solely by Camilla? From behind, Anne observed Tom Parker Bowles as he spoke politely with those around him. His smile seemed confident, yet slightly strained, like an actor still learning his part. A sharp irony cut through her thoughts. The outsider's son, she reflected coldly, her gaze hard with disdain, will never write his name into this dynasty. Television cameras swept across the congregation, but they lingered only briefly on Anne, if at all, before shifting away. Instead, they focused on what appeared to be a carefully constructed image, Queen Consort. Camilla seated beside King Charles III, Tom positioned next to her, and other family members completing a picture of unity and modernity. Outside the Abbey, that image filled the large screens. Major outlets, from The Times to The Guardian, mirrored the same narrative in their live coverage. Headlines scrolled confidently. British royal family united at memorial, a symbol of modern unity. Anne's absence went unmentioned. When the main service concluded and the organ fell silent, the atmosphere softened. Guests stood, exchanged greetings, and the clink of champagne glasses accompanied low laughter. Camilla approached Anne, her smile flawless, a crystal flute catching the chandelier's light in her hand. Leaning in slightly, her voice carried clearly, despite the surrounding hum. "You should consider resting," Camilla said smoothly. "The monarchy needs a new generation of representatives, doesn't it?" The words were courteous on the surface, but the challenge beneath them was unmistakable. Camilla was asserting change, nudging Anne toward the margins. Anne met her gaze without hesitation, her eyes sharp enough to pierce the facade. Her reply was calm, deliberate, and precise. "The new generation of the royal family," she said evenly, "is born in the palace, not admitted with an invitation." For a fleeting second, Camilla's smile faltered, as though struck by a sudden cold gust. Beneath the perfect makeup and practiced composure, a flash of anger flared. Her grip tightened around the champagne glass until her knuckles whitened, betraying the effort to restrain the storm within. All her life, Camilla had endured murmurs of being an outsider, whispered judgments from aristocrats and the press alike. Rarely, however, had someone spoken that truth to her so directly. Her heart raced, partly from the sting of public humiliation, partly from the warning embedded in Anne's words. "You and your son will go no further." Camilla forced herself to breathe, tilting her head slightly as she reclaimed her smile, though its edges remained rigid, almost frozen. One thought echoed relentlessly in her mind. "Just wait. This is not over." She turned away, striving for composure, but her steps wavered faintly, as if the weight of Anne's words pressed heavily upon her. The ceremony concluded with polite applause, and the guests slowly filtered out of Westminster Abbey. Yet something fundamental had shifted between the two women. Anne departed with steady strides, the crisp autumn wind cutting against her face. Deep within, she understood with absolute clarity. This was only the beginning of the battle. In the days following the memorial service at Westminster Abbey, a heavy tension settled inside the private office at Clarence House, the very space where Queen Consort Camilla usually handled matters with precision and quiet calculation. She sat behind her polished walnut desk, her expression still arranged into its familiar, flawless smile, yet her sharp eyes revealed the unrest stirred by Anne's defiance. She had not forgotten that moment, the brief falter in her smile, the champagne glass clenched too tightly in her hand, and Anne's icy reply cutting through the air like steel. The new generation is born in the palace, not invited in by ticket. The words replayed endlessly in her mind, a clear warning that Anne would not yield. Camilla understood one thing with certainty. If she intended to secure a central place for her son, Tom Parker Bowles, within the royal circle, she had to move quickly. The first obstacle was Anne herself, the embodiment of old traditions Camilla now viewed as an immovable barrier. Tom sat nearby in a leather chair by the window. He projected confidence, yet a trace of unease flickered in his eyes as he watched his mother. Camilla had summoned him earlier to discuss the fallout from the ceremony. Between them, the air felt thick and oppressive, the steady ticking of the pendulum clock echoing like a countdown. Camilla finally turned toward him, her voice low but firm. "Tom, you can see it clearly. Anne won't be pushed aside easily. We need stronger measures to limit her influence. Her presence in the media must be reduced." Tom nodded, his response steady. "I'm prepared, Mother, but we must proceed carefully. Anne is not someone you can simply sideline." A faint smile curved Camilla's lips, calculation flashing in her eyes. "That is exactly why we act now." After Tom left, Camilla called in her newly appointed communications director, Edward, a polished, middle-aged man she had personally recruited months earlier from a trusted public relations firm. He entered carrying an iPad filled with data, his posture attentive and loyal. Camilla instructed him to quietly diminish Anne's visibility in the media while promoting Tom and her own family as symbols of a modern monarchy. She ordered the release of anonymously sourced articles highlighting alleged irregularities in Anne's charitable organizations and told him to cancel Anne's appearances if necessary, always with reasonable excuses to avoid suspicion. Edward nodded, rapidly taking notes, assuring her that the first articles would appear within 48 hours and that schedules would be adjusted for maximum effect. Clarence House, outwardly Camilla's most private and secure stronghold, was in truth the most dangerous place of all, where every move she made was silently recorded, waiting for the moment it would be revealed. At the same time, in Princess Anne's private office at Kensington Palace, the calm was abruptly shattered. Anne sat at her desk, a place where she had spent countless hours overseeing royal responsibilities. The warm glow of the desk lamp highlighted the lines on her face, marks of years and battles endured, yet her eyes remained sharp and alert. Before her lay neatly organized stacks of documents. Veterans' aid programs, children's education funds, wildlife conservation initiatives. These causes had defined decades of her life, serving not only the public, but also as a way to honor her mother's legacy. Her personal assistant, Margaret, a middle-aged woman with a troubled expression, entered holding the latest edition of the Times. "Your Highness, there's an article," she murmured, setting the paper down. Anne unfolded it, and the headline struck like a blade of ice. "Princess Anne's Charity Fund, Lack of Transparency or Public Misuse." Citing unnamed insiders, the article accused Anne's foundation of mismanaging funds, pointing to so-called extravagant travel and expenses framed as suspiciously opaque. Each sentence was crafted like a poisoned dart, sensational in tone and clearly designed to provoke doubt. Anne's fingers tightened around the paper, her knuckles whitening as she crushed it in her grip, fighting the fury surging through her chest. Those charities were her life's work, the foundations she had built to uphold trust and dignity within the monarchy. For Camilla to weaponize them was unforgivable. Since the day at Westminster Abbey, Camilla's behavior had grown increasingly aggressive, her forced smile and talk of a new generation exposing a blatant agenda. Anne's heart pounded, her face flushed, and for a moment, she imagined Camilla's mocking laughter rising from the printed words themselves. She believes these cheap tactics will destroy me, Anne thought coolly, her inner voice calm and steely. But she did not surrender to anger. Drawing a deep, controlled breath, measured like that of a seasoned warrior, like the rhythm of a warrior familiar with courtly storms, she loosened her grip and let the newspaper rest on the desk. Her eyes scanned the article again, now calm, sharp, and analytical. The attack did not end there. Like a carefully orchestrated campaign, similar stories appeared almost simultaneously in The Sun, The Guardian, and even on the BBC's online platforms. Headlines questioned her integrity, stressing the need for transparency in a modern monarchy, subtly portraying her as an outdated relic. The pressure extended beyond the press. One by one, Anne's scheduled public appearances vanished. An art exhibition opening at the Victoria and Albert Museum, where she was to serve as guest of honor, was postponed indefinitely due to vague technical difficulties. A charity fundraiser for disadvantaged children in central London was abruptly cancelled, her name quietly removed from the guest list. When Anne contacted the organizers herself, her voice calm yet firm, she received only evasive, overly polite explanations. Her certainty hardened as she noticed changes within the palace's communications team. At a recent internal meeting, unfamiliar faces appeared, young PR specialists recruited from media firms linked to Camilla. They handled press releases, curated images, and shaped public narratives. A trusted palace veteran quietly warned Anne in a corridor. They report directly to the Queen Consort's office. Anne felt no surprise. It merely confirmed her suspicions. This was no coincidence. Every sign, the defamatory articles, the cancelled events, the reshaped communications staff, pointed to the same controlling hand, Camilla. Yet Anne knew she lacked concrete proof. Instincts and fragments were not enough for a public confrontation. Outwardly, she remained composed, her expression calm, a restrained smile concealing the storm within. Internally, her resolve was set. She began recording every detail, contacting trusted allies inside the palace, and tightening her watch. The scattered pieces would be assembled into a complete picture. Camilla has made the first move, Anne thought, staring out the window as the autumn light faded. But she will regret challenging me. Anne knew exactly where her counterattack would begin, with evidence and with a dossier powerful enough to shift the balance. Night slowly descended over London, accompanied by a cold, fine drizzle. Each drop settled gently onto the cobblestone streets, which shimmered beneath pale, yellow streetlights, forming hazy circles of light like the watchful eyes of history itself. Princess Anne received a short message from Prince William, its simplicity carrying unmistakable urgency. "Meet me at Highgrove tonight. Important." Without a moment's hesitation, she rose from the leather chair in her study, wrapped herself in a dark wool cloak, and took her car keys. The old Land Rover came to life, and she departed the palace in silence, its tires cutting steadily through the mist as she drove toward Gloucestershire. Highgrove, King Charles's private residence, rested quietly amid manicured gardens, shielded by lines of ancient trees whose interlaced branches formed a natural barrier from the outside world. Under faint moonlight, the rose beds and trimmed hedges resembled a serene painting. Yet on this night, that calm was only a disguise, concealing a meeting meant to remain unseen. William waited inside the intimate study where flames in the fireplace cast shifting red and amber light across his sharply defined face. Weariness showed in his features, but so did unwavering resolve, the mark of a man bearing immense responsibility. He stood near the hearth, hands clasped behind his back, the firelight reflecting off his neatly tailored gray suit, simple yet refined, reinforcing the quiet authority of a future king. When Anne entered, William greeted her with a brief embrace, an uncommon display of affection that revealed the depth of their bond. His eyes, however, remained alert, quickly scanning the doorway to ensure they were alone. He closed the heavy oak door and checked the lock with deliberate care. "Anne, this can't go on," he said softly, his voice lowered to keep the words from escaping the wood-paneled walls. He pulled a leather chair closer to the fire for her, its warmth illuminating her face. The room was thick with the scent of burning logs, mixed with the faint aroma of old paper from towering shelves lined with leather-bound volumes on royal history and tradition. Reaching into his coat pocket, William withdrew a small black USB drive and inserted it into the laptop, resting on the antique desk. A piece dating back to Queen Victoria, a silent reminder of the legacy they were fighting to protect. "This is a recording between Camilla and Tom," he explained, pressing play, his voice slightly rough with tension. The audio played clearly, without distortion. Camilla's voice rang out cold and deliberate, instructing that Anne's presence in the media be reduced. Each sentence exposed careful calculation, sharp and unmistakable. "We need stronger measures to limit her influence. I think we should reduce her media coverage." Anne listened without a flicker of reaction. Her expression remained composed, though her hands clenched tightly beneath the desk, fury contained with iron discipline, like a storm held in check. William explained how he had obtained the recording. It came from Harold, a long-serving palace attendant who had worked for the royal family since the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. Loyal to the institution above all else, Harold had accidentally overheard the conversation between Camilla and Tom in a secluded corridor at Clarence House. Alarmed by the plan to discredit Anne and manipulate the royal image, he had discreetly recorded the exchange on his phone, hidden in his coat pocket. The risk had been immense. His position, even his safety, could have been lost if discovered. Still, Harold chose to pass the recording to William through secure channels on one strict condition: his identity must remain protected. "I don't want trouble, Your Highness," he had whispered during their secret meeting, fear evident in his voice, but resolve unbroken. "But I can't stand by while the monarchy is handled this way." Recognizing the importance of the evidence, William had promised Harold both protection and discretion. When the recording ended, William shut off the laptop and met Anne's gaze directly. His voice carried both sincerity and the weight of duty. "I can't openly confront this, but I won't leave you to face it alone." He understood the limits imposed by his role as heir to the throne. He had to remain publicly neutral, avoid any action that might destabilize the monarchy. Yet loyalty to his family demanded that he act, even if only quietly. This, he knew, was how he could help, discreetly but decisively. Anne did not cry. Instead, she placed a firm, reassuring hand on William's shoulder, a gesture filled with strength and solidarity, an unspoken pact between two generations bound by blood and duty. "Thank you," she said evenly, her voice steady and unshaken. "I will not allow us to be replaced by a media spectacle." She took the USB drive and secured it inside her coat pocket. Already her mind was working, planning copies, sealing the evidence, deciding how to wield it as a double-edged weapon, a warning within the palace and preparation for a decisive strike. This recording was powerful, and Anne knew it must be used with precision to hit Camilla at the core of her influence. The meeting ended quickly. William escorted Anne out through the back entrance to avoid attention, pale moonlight filtering through thin clouds. As she drove back through the darkened roads toward the palace, Anne felt the weight of isolation lift, replaced by strength drawn from unity. She was no longer alone. Streetlights flashed across the car window, briefly illuminating her face. A portrait of resilience. Ahead lay deeper conspiracies and an unrelenting struggle for power. The game had entered a new phase, and Anne was ready for the moves yet to come. In the days following her meeting with William, Princess Anne moved with the discipline of a veteran tactician. Her emotions were firmly contained, her attention fixed on a single objective, striking at the very core of Camilla's power. She spent long hours in her private study at Kensington Palace, where muted daylight filtered through the window and cast gentle shadows across piles of aging documents. With deliberate care, she duplicated the recording into multiple formats, digital files and printed transcripts, each one sealed with her personal royal crest. These copies were more than proof. They were safeguards. One was locked away in her private safe, another entrusted to a loyal solicitor, and a third concealed deep within the palace library. Anne understood too well that in the dangerous arena of court politics, reliance on a single safeguard was a fatal mistake. Under the pretext of an urgent issue concerning royal finances and public image, Anne called for an extraordinary session of the Royal Council at Buckingham Palace. The palace, an enduring emblem of British authority, stood with its long corridors and ancestral portraits bearing silent witness to yet another impending upheaval. The summons were brief and authoritative, delivered through secure channels to every council member, ensuring Camilla's attendance. No agenda was disclosed. Only urgency was emphasized, and secrecy strictly enforced. Anne knew Camilla would not dare refuse. Absence would only expose her weakening. Standing before a council made up of senior royals, such as William, seasoned advisors, and influential nobles, whose loyalty lay with the monarchy above all else. The meeting convened on a bleak afternoon, gray clouds pressing heavily against Buckingham's windows as if heralding a storm. Inside the council chamber, silence reigned. Soft golden light from the ceiling lamps illuminated the long table draped in deep green velvet, surrounded by ancient leather chairs arranged in perfect balance. The air carried the faint scent of old wood and ink, a reminder of centuries of royal governance. The council members sat stern-faced. William near the center, his expression reserved yet quietly supportive. Elderly aristocrats jotting notes into leather-bound journals. And Camilla seated prominently to the right of the table's head, maintaining her usual composure. Her dark, flawlessly tailored dress and polite smile concealed any hint of unease, as though she still believed herself untouchable. Anne entered last. Dressed simply, but with unmistakable authority, she carried a black leather briefcase containing her evidence. She took her seat opposite Camilla, their eyes locking briefly. One gaze cold and unyielding, the other strained by the effort to remain calm. Dispensing with formal pleasantries, Anne spoke clearly into the silence. "I request permission to begin with an audio recording. I believe everyone present needs to hear it, as it directly affects the integrity and public image of the monarchy." She activated the recorder placed at the center of the table. The sound filled the room, clear, undeniable, and damning, like an accusation that could not be refuted. Camilla's voice emerged, unmistakable and calculated, issuing instructions to the communications director. Remove Anne's presence from official broadcasts, reduce her visibility, and promote Tom as the face of the new generation, modern and appealing to the public. Each sentence struck like a blade, stripping away the queen consort's credibility and exposing her attempt to manipulate the media to elevate her son while sidelining Anne. A suffocating silence followed, only the faint sounds of breathing and the rustle of paper broke the stillness as several members took notes. William remained motionless, his eyes briefly shifting toward Camilla with restrained disappointment. No one spoke, all waited. When the recording ended, Anne looked directly at Camilla, her voice steady and cold. "If this recording were ever to leave these walls, there would be little left of your honor to defend." She paused, allowing the words to settle, then continued in a calm but weighty tone. "But I have not done that. I am offering you the chance to step back before the damage becomes irreversible." Eyes around the table turned toward Camilla. Some council members scribbled furiously. Others frowned in open suspicion. Not a single voice came to her defense. Camilla forced a smile, though the stiffness at its edges betrayed her. Beneath the table, her hands clenched so tightly that her knuckles blanched, nails biting into her palms as she fought rising panic and fury. She was accustomed to whispered insinuations and hidden maneuvering, but this, being exposed so openly before the council, the true holders of power, was devastating. Her heart thundered, driven by humiliation and the terrifying realization that Anne now held undeniable leverage. She struggled to remain composed, yet a flash of anger flickered in her eyes, and a faint tremor ran through her shoulders. "Just wait," she told herself bitterly. "I won't retreat so easily this time." The chamber sank into heavy silence, the cold light overhead sharpening every stern expression around the green velvet table. William finally spoke, his voice low yet authoritative. "The royal image is being exploited for personal interests. This cannot continue." Though he did not name Camilla, every gaze shifted toward her. Speaking with the calm discipline forged over a lifetime, William presented the proposal prepared with Anne's quiet endorsement. "To resolve this, I propose a complete restructuring of the Royal Communications Department. It will no longer report solely to the Queen Consort's office, but to a Royal Communications Oversight Committee composed of 3 members, Princess Anne, myself, and an independent external expert, preferably a respected media professional." The council listened intently, pens moving swiftly. William paused, then continued. "Furthermore, we must establish clear rules for royal representation. Only individuals of direct royal blood may officially represent the monarchy at national ceremonies or occupy seats of honor. This removes ambiguity and protects the monarchy's legitimacy." He moved on to financial oversight, his tone firm. All charitable funds and media budgets must be reported transparently to the council on a quarterly basis. Any media contract must be approved by at least 2 committee members. Printed copies of the proposal were distributed, the terms laid out with legal precision. Anne remained still, scanning the room, as she saw agreement forming among the council members. Veterans of countless royal crises who understood the necessity of clarity and control. The debate erupted immediately. Unable to contain herself any longer, Camilla rose first. Her voice sought composure but quivered with suppressed rage. "This is a direct insult to the role of the Queen Consort. I have devoted myself to the monarchy without rest. These changes strip me of authority and endanger the unity of the realm." Her heart raced, each beat like an alarm bell, fueled by fury and the growing fear that her plans were collapsing. No one came to her aid. She stood alone, her objections sounding increasingly hollow in a battle already turning against her. Anne replied at once, her voice soft yet razor-sharp. "We are simply ensuring transparency. If there is nothing to conceal, there is nothing to fear." The words sliced through the room, plunging it into silence. Camilla opened her mouth to respond, but no words emerged. She felt exposed before the assembly, the reputation she had spent years constructing, unraveling under their scrutiny. Other members joined in, including an elderly noble who spoke firmly. "The monarchy must be protected from all risks, especially personal ambitions." Arguments flew back and forth like arrows, but gradually the momentum shifted decisively toward William and Anne. After 30 minutes of intense debate, the council voted. The result was overwhelming. Camilla had no choice but to accept the decision. In the weeks that followed the Royal Council's ruling, Clarence House, Camilla's long familiar residence, still appeared outwardly magnificent. The gardens remained perfectly manicured, and the marble corridors gleamed beneath the autumn sunlight. To the outside world, nothing seemed altered. She was still the Queen Consort, still held a prestigious title, and still appeared at public engagements where protocol demanded her presence. Yet beneath that polished surface, her real authority had quietly ebbed away, like a stream drying up without a sound. The Royal Communications Department, once her sharpest instrument for shaping public perception, was now firmly under the control of the new Oversight Committee, where William and Anne exercised decisive power. Every image campaign she had carefully cultivated to raise Tom into a position of honor was abruptly shut down. As final and unyielding as an iron gate slammed closed. Camilla often sat alone in her private drawing room, watching the firelight flicker across her face. Her familiar smile still appeared, but it was strained now, barely concealing the bitterness gnawing relentlessly within her. Royal dinner parties, once a stage where she commanded attention, no longer revolved around Camilla's family. At a discreet gathering in Windsor, when she casually remarked, "My son has such wonderful modern ideas for charitable projects," those around her responded only with polite smiles before gently steering the conversation elsewhere. To the weather, to international affairs, to anything unrelated. She understood the message immediately. Her influence was no longer hers to wield. Though she retained the title of Queen Consort, she was no longer a figure others felt compelled to consider. Each time the realization surfaced, her heart raced. Her greatest worry was for her son, the son she had hoped would become the bridge to her own legacy. She reached out to former advisors, searching for even a sliver of opportunity for him. But every call ended the same way, wrapped in courtesy and finality. "I'm terribly sorry, Your Majesty, but the new committee has changed the protocols." Standing by the window, Camilla stared outward, her eyes clouded, feeling as though she had been pushed into the shadows of the very palace she once commanded. Meanwhile, Tom Parker Bowles, once thrust forward with expectations of becoming a symbol of a modern monarchy, was swiftly and mercilessly pushed aside. Within weeks, he vanished from official ceremonies altogether. There were no more invitations to national events, no more seats of honor at grand occasions. Even the charitable activities he had once participated in under the royal banner were now closed to him, as if his name had been permanently erased from every list. At social gatherings, Tom continued to wear courteous smiles. But deep inside, he felt hollow, as though a vital part of himself had been stripped away. The future his mother had promised would place him in the glow of royal prestige. Princess Anne, by contrast, reclaimed her rightful position as naturally as a wind returning to its true course after a storm. At the inauguration of the Windsor National Museum, a significant event attended by the entire royal family, Anne entered the grand hall with commanding presence, like a warrior returning from battle. Her navy coat, embroidered with the insignia of the royal cavalry, framed her tall figure perfectly. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, and her sharp gaze swept calmly across the crowd, radiating quiet but undeniable authority. She took her seat in the place of honor, immediately to William's left, the very position taken from her at the memorial and now properly restored. As she appeared, the audience erupted into enthusiastic applause, as if welcoming back an irreplaceable pillar. The live broadcast no longer avoided her. Cameras focused closely on Anne as the national anthem played, capturing every line of her face, resilient, dignified, and free of ostentation. Major media outlets reported in unanimous admiration. Princess Anne shines alongside senior royals at the National Museum inauguration. And Princess Anne's commanding presence at Windsor. Elegant, measured, and unassuming. Somewhere beyond the cameras, Camilla and Tom may have watched with bitterness in their eyes, but Anne did not look back. To her, the monarchy had been protected, and her family's legacy stood secure. With the steadfast strength of granite, Princess Anne had not only reclaimed her seat of honor, but affirmed an unchanging truth. She was an inseparable part of the royal family, a symbol destined to endure forever in the public's heart and in history. Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You might enjoy it.